Hey everyone, it is George Curos, and welcome back to another best of episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast for the month of October 2021. And if you're watching this on video or maybe even listening on audio, you see you might be hearing my audio is not as good as it usually is. My background, I'm actually in a hotel, and I was actually supposed to be home. And I was going to be home, be able to record this, but some plans had changed, and I'll be honest with you, in a way that I actually didn't want them to change. I'm supposed to be home right now, and I'm kind of bummed about it, obviously. And it made me kind of think about how sometimes the things that we want to happen most in our lives, when they don't, sometimes it's a good thing. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing, but it just kind of made me reflect on some of the things that happened in my life that I thought I really wanted that didn't work out and actually led to something way better. And I think of this one time, and I don't know if I've ever really shared this story, but I actually was kind of done with teaching. I know I've talked about this before. I was kind of done with teaching, and I decided I was going to give it one more year, and I actually ended up getting a job at a school in Parkhouse School Division under the best principal I've ever had. Her name is Kelly Wilkins. And if you've listened to me for any amount of time, if you've read the stuff that I write about, Kelly has had a massive impact on my life. And I'm so blessed that, I got to work for her in several capacities in my career as an educator. And what people don't know, and I haven't really shared, is when I accepted that job, I was so excited about it, but I actually got an interview for what I thought was a dream job. And this dream job was actually going to be with the Department of Education, doing educational technology stuff. And it was actually what I was really hoping to eventually do. And I actually, I already accepted this job, and I felt like it was kind of a bad practice for me to accept a job, take an interview, and then quit before I even started. So I actually was really nervous, but I felt, the best thing that I could do is actually talk to this new employer and say like, hey, here's an opportunity for me that I really wanted, and I know I've already accepted the job. Would you be okay with me taking the interview? And I thought that was just the ethical thing to actually do. And even though I was nervous about it, I made that phone call. And so I actually called Kelly, and I was expecting like, how dare you take this? We took a chance on you, blah, 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 right? And shockingly, what she had said to me was, hey, George, here's the thing. If that's your dream job and you don't take this opportunity, you're gonna regret it. And we don't want you in this space where you're not happy here, in this place. And I don't want to say this in a negative way, but we can find another teacher, right? But your dream is your dream. And so take the interview, and if you don't get it, you got this job here, and it's a perfect backup plan, and we'd love to have you. And I understand if things work out, then it'd be our loss, but we'll find a way forward. And I'll tell you, this is not the response I was expecting. I was expecting like, how could you do this to me? How could you do this to our team? But really what was weird was that actually made me want to work for Kelly, right? Now I still took the interview, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't get the job, and I think I would have taken it still. But when I didn't get the job, I didn't even care. I was really excited to work with somebody like this. And having that opportunity to work with Kelly totally changed my career. And I just wonder what would have happened if I would have actually got what was my dream job at that time. And so I was just kind of thinking about that sometimes, we're not happy about something that's happened, but maybe when we look back, do we see it as an opportunity? Now, I took every advantage of working with Kelly. I learned from her. I really kind of changed my attitude towards education. Like, it was, a huge amount her leadership, but it was also a change in my attitude. But just kind of thinking about that, sometimes the things that we want the most and that we don't get might actually be things that work out for the best. So I just wanted to share that little story with you. And what you're going to hear is a lot of other great stories from amazing educators, but I wanted to share that with you just as a kind of a reminder about sometimes the things that we go through. But I hope you enjoy this. George Curos from a hotel room. Welcome back to another highlight episode of the Innovator's Mindset podcast.
let's start off first question, right? And I know this one, I'm ready for this one because last time when we hit it, I was not ready for it. So it is a very powerful answer. And can you talk about a teacher that inspired you and why?
Yes. So I would like to talk about my first grade teacher, Mrs. Bogus. Shout out to Mrs. Bogus.
Okay, we're doing it early because I'm not doing it after. I like this one. This is kind of like the old school Will Ferrell, kind of like. All right.
Yeah, I don't know. I just really felt that.
It was good. I liked it.
So in order to fully, I think, feel the impact that Mrs. Bogus had on me, I need to go back and share a little personal story. So when I was in kindergarten, actually, my dad was diagnosed with chronic myeloid leukemia, and he battled cancer through the winter into the winter of my first grade year. And I can still remember when my mom had to come home and share that just impossibly difficult news with me that he had passed away. And I can still picture myself sitting in the bedroom with her. There was a canopy bed, and I had a nice quilt on my bed, brown shag carpet. I can just see my little self sitting next to her. But I remember that, but I don't remember the words. But she remembers it very vividly. And as she shared this difficult news, the way she describes it is that my very small little self flies off the bed and runs to the window, and overcome by grief. My face is hot, tears pouring down my face, like I'm pulling the blinds off of the window. I mean, that's just how much feeling was in my little body. Like I was able to pull them off the window. And I turned around to face her, and my first question to her out of anything, my first question was, are we going to have enough food to eat? Mm-hmm. And that's a really difficult part of the story for me to share, but I find it important to share because I think sometimes we get really caught up in talking about, we're preparing these kids for the real world. That's very real. Doesn't get much more real than that. And so for 2 weeks, I stayed home with her. This reality that, a parent could be taken from me forever was very vivid for me. So we clung to each other in this very difficult time, but eventually I had to go back to school. And I remember the day that I had to go back to school was a nerve-wracking one, and I was very anxious about going back. And I can picture her little powder blue Toyota Camry driving me around the circle drive to the front of the school. And I turned to, walk out the door, and I'm thinking, wow, it's going to take a Goliath level strength to get this door open and step out this door. Mm-hmm. And I look up, and my first grade teacher, Mrs. Bogus, had a bunch of my friends from my class waiting for me at the front door, their little faces pressed up against the glass, cheering for me and waiting for me and beckoning me to come in as if they were rolling out the red carpet for my re-entry into school. And what I love about that story is that she took something that was impossibly difficult, and she knew exactly what I needed to have the strength to come back. She turned it into a celebration. She created a very special moment for me. So, and she really had my back multiple times that school year. And I think that, there's lots of little stories of teachers who are doing that every day. They probably, she might not even remember that story. But I'm almost 40 years old. I'll be 40 in June. And I still very vividly, that Mrs. Bogus story is a big hallmark story for me in my lifetime.
There, and there's no way she doesn't remember that. I know that too, right? And I think that part of it too is that we go through that as educators, with our kids. We go through that process, and how it's just amazing. I actually I'm wearing a hoodie and it has a pocket, and I'm holding my hands. Just so much feeling in there, because like you said this beautifully too. This is not just the story of your teacher, but so many teachers that have done this for kids that don't get appreciated, don't, feel that welcome. So I want to give just amazing, give that for all the teachers that made that impact. And so that story, it's so powerful. It is, something that I think about too. And the other thing you said too, and I think it's really powerful, is that notion of people talk about hey, we got to make things relevant, and how kids are dealing with some pretty real things too. And I think sometimes not acknowledging that is hurtful to them. And that's something I'm not going to build on it anymore. I think that story is just amazing. And I so appreciate you sharing that, because I know it cannot be easy to actually share that. So thanks for I know You love you some Brene Brown. So thanks for being vulnerable. Right. I want to go back one part, and I think this is good advice because I know a lot of people that listen to this are either aspiring administrators, or maybe, wanting to go into different roles. And that notion that you were kind of just out there, being present and being, just kind of like before you had that opportunity, you were showing that you had the ability to do it. Right. Yes. And I think that to me is really important. I remember right before I became an administrator, my first year, my first day, we met superintendents at the school district, which tells me a lot about the school district I worked in, is that I didn't like wait years or get into trouble to meet a superintendent. They like welcomed all the new staff. They were there for that. And I remember I actually went to go one of the associate superintendents and I said, hey, look, I'm really good with technology stuff. And I would love to actually have the opportunity to lead some initiatives at the school district level. So if you ever need anything, please let me know. Mm-hmm. And within a week of being in this district, I was already getting called to central office to do stuff because I had actually, went to that space. And I think kind of the moral of the story, for lack of a better term, is that when you show that you can lead before you're asked to do it, that's what makes effective leaders. That's what, really, and that really started opening up doors for me because I wasn't getting paid extra or anything like that. I wanted to progress in my career, and I had showed the initiative to do that, and it led to a lot of great opportunities. So, and awesome. I'm glad. I hope Sonia's get to listen to this as well, and I appreciate that the shout out. So, last question, and you've done a ton of learning. I've connected with you over the years. So, when you look back at the beginning of your career, what advice would you give to yourself as a first year teacher?
Well, I know a lot of people get the advice of don't be seen or heard for about 3 years until you actually understand what you're doing. And that's far from the truth. I think new teachers have a lot of brilliant ideas, and I think their voice is valid. In addition, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think that was the thing that helped me the most. Was I understood that I had a mentor teacher, and I understood that there were people on my team that I could ask. And although it was uncomfortable to show that you didn't know something on the campus, it was extremely valuable to get their information and their perspective and learn through that. Similar to the mentorship piece of trying to get into admin, you need to make sure that you're asking the questions, and it doesn't matter if it's 1,000 questions. It probably will be. It's okay to ask and get that knowledge, because if you don't know something, the expectation is still there for you to get it done. And so it's important to try and learn as quickly as possible. And yes, it does take multiple years for you to feel comfortable and to feel like you've mastered the curriculum, the classroom management piece. I mean, there's a lot of components to teaching, but it's extremely valuable to keep getting knowledge and seeking.
See, we're three-part beings, right? Mind, body, and spirit. And so usually when we're having difficulties focusing, it's because biologically we have a lot of adrenaline that keeps our mind racing, right? So also there's a comparison between people that are highly organized and structured. The sounds that best suit them are like soft jazz music, music that has melodies that you can follow. And for people that are on the go, that have schedules that are more flexible, that are not as so highly structured, sounds that don't have direct rhythms and melodies to follow can help them decrease some of that anxiety. With the sound bowls, what's happening, there's 7 bowls, and they are correlated to the 7 energy centers in the bottom of the body. And so every time the bowl is strummed, it releases a frequency that you hear that kind of just moves around the internal body chemistry and gets those hormones that are not regulated or not balanced due to trauma in the body to start pumping and going. So what you'll find is that the longer that you're able to meditate or listen to these sound healings, naturally the adrenaline, all of the other hormones that have built up that are toxic in your body will start to lower. Your blood pressure will start to lower because your body's naturally producing what it needs to produce. When we're in traumatic situations or hurried situations, we're producing a lot of adrenaline in our body, and high levels of that over time pushes us through situations that sometimes we can't think through all the way. Our body responds before our brain does. And so when you're able to kind of regulate those emotions and calm down, you're able to make better decisions for higher emotional payoff. But it takes practice. I was the same way. And now when I put on the headphones and listen to like binaural beats, which is beats that have conflicting sounds to help regulate the hemispheres in your brain, so it helps for deeper states of meditation. Now, honestly, it feels like heaven when I hear it, because it's just a release. Have you seen those videos of people, the ASMR, like whispering? It's sort of doing the same thing, because we're in a society with so much energy and so much on the go.
Right.
And so when you have to calm yourself down to focus and listen, it's releasing those hormones and helping regulate your emotions.
I'm gonna like start a paid podcast listening, because I feel like I'm getting some gold right now. Because like
I love it.
Seriously. And I know people listening to this. So just I want to try to understand this a little bit deeper. So it's not just like this sound will work for everybody. It's actually kind of identifying some of the ways that you are, and kind of identifying some of those different. Am I understanding that correctly? Because that to me, like, you know, I think a lot of times it's, if I get a massage, it's like this music's not doing anything. It's actually making me more anxious sometimes, right? And maybe it's kind of just how I'm wired a little bit. Am I reading that right?
It could be, right? You got to find what works for you. But then also there's a number of things, right? When you set yourself down for meditation, sometimes people feel guilty. There's a number of thoughts that goes through their head. Like, is this really working? Do I even have time for this? So they don't even gift themselves the time of silence, of just not moving, relaxing your brain. And so when you get into that space of just letting what comes to you and observe your thoughts, right? Observe what's happening so that you can make better decisions. It prepares you. It makes you able to regulate yourselves in difficult situations, and so that you're taking what you're practicing and you can apply it to real life, right? Life is supposed to be a walking meditation, if you think about it. You're supposed to always be aware of what's happening to yourself, so that when you're encountering something, you get to choose if you want to experience it or not. We don't have to experience everything that comes into our face, right? But the problem is, people get so triggered by what's in front of them because of a biological response that's inside of them. Think about a situation that happened to you that caused some sort of trauma that, you know, you'll have a trigger to, right? It's stored in your body. All of that energy, all of the hormones, the built up hormone levels is stored. So when you have a similar trigger that you encounter, your body will respond faster than your brain will, unless you put yourself in different environments to get what you need naturally.
When you think of a teacher who inspired you, like who is a teacher, like in your, maybe as a student, maybe as a colleague, that inspired you, and why?
Sure. Well, when I was in Springfield College, where I was an undergrad, and at the time I was kind of, sowing our oats, right? We kind of go to college, we kind of figure out what we're going to do. And one of the things that my teacher, Suzanne Campbell, she recognized quickly is I like to talk. I like to talk in class. I like to do projects. And anytime we had to write a paper, I'd always have a great excuse why I could do a project, or I could speak, or I could find a way to get around writing, because it was definitely my weak spot. So instead of just owning that, I found a way around it. And even though I thought I was incredibly sneaky at 18 to this doctor, college professor, I didn't think could figure me out. So she finally pulled me aside and she said, "Hey, listen, I know you don't want to write, but I need you to write." This was a college level English class. She says, "What if you keep a journal for the entire freshman year, and I'll let you out of any of the formal writing process?" So I'm like, hell yeah, I'll write a journal. Like, well, this will be easy. And it turned out, and I still have it, and it turned out that I documented every day of my freshman year. But what it allowed me to do is express myself. And some of the things I wouldn't, I'm shocked she'd even read, but she'd make comments about Friday nights out and different things. But she would allow me to just write, and she would always meet with me after and be like sharing some things like, okay, why don't you turn this into an actual story? Why don't you? And she saw how I learned. And because I wasn't a real formal writer as a younger student, she didn't hold that against me. I mean, she literally let me write a journal for the entire year instead of 5 major papers. And it really showed me, once I became a teacher, because I went for elementary education, I look back and at the time I was like, oh, this is cool. I get to write a journal, joke with my friends. I'm like, I got out of this assignment. But what it allowed me to do is actually be more articulate, bring more ideas into it, share some of the things that I wanted to share from my lens. I'm sure it entertained her weekly to read what I had to write in there, but it was something that showed me early on that if the teacher can reach a student at their capacity and things that they do well, I was psyched to write each week. One, because I'm like, how can I shock her this week? But it just turned into a collaborative opportunity for me to grow as a writer, and for me to start to just, her goal was just to get me to write every day.
Right.
And then that's what happened. And that was something I'll never forget.
Susan Campbell, is it Susan Campbell? Is that correct? Susan Campbell, if you are listening.
Oh, what's up?
There you go. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about this analogy I shared with you. Okay. And you know the one about the reffing, right? Yes. So we talked about this. And so, as a superintendent, like, obviously stuff it's not like everything's just smooth sailing lately, right? There's got to be some stuff that you deal with. And the analogy I shared with you is that I liken being a superintendent, actually, to be honest with you, a teacher, not just superintendents, but basically anyone in education, to when I used to ref basketball, especially at the high levels. And the thing that I always say is that when you ref basketball or any sport, you are wrong 100% of the time to 50% of the people. It just depends on which 50%. Whatever the day, right? And it feels like that all the time, and people feel that. So how do you, instead of like talking about like some of the things that you struggle with, how do you make tough decisions when you know that you're going to get pushback from some group right away? Like how do you actually come to the decisions that you make? Because I think that is actually much more important than necessarily the decisions you make or the things that you have. Because like people, sometimes if you're just making a decision because you're scared of this group, probably not going to be best for kids, right? So like, how do you make decisions when you know you're going to get pushback on stuff?
That's a great question, George.
I actually just made that question up, and I'm like, that was a good question, George.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. I was pretty.
I think you probably have a book somewhere, and
I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, that is a good question.
All right. Well, so I will say to you that as this has kind of been my mantra ever since I was a building administrator, and this was shortly after I became a parent. I became a dad. I would always say to everyone and anyone, whenever I had the opportunity to be in front of a group that I got to talk to, especially educators or those people working with me, I would say to them that making decisions, especially tough decisions, has to be grounded in what it is that you would want to have for your own kids. You make decisions, or you have to make decisions that are based on what you think is right, what you think is going to benefit kids, the majority of kids,
right?
Hopefully all of kids,
right?
In the most impactful way. And you have to see it through the eyes of not just a person who's doing a job, but as a person who is invested because you have your own kids that could benefit from that.
So
I make decisions based on what it is that I want for my own kids, my own biological kids.
That actually, for me, this is as a parent, I'm taking off my educator hat. As a parent, this is my expectation. So Shaun, if my kids are in your district, I would say to you, Shaun, all I ask of you, never put my kid in a class that you wouldn't put your own kid.
And that's what I want 100%. That's what I want 100%.
Yeah.
And I would say that to my staff too, all the time. If I walk into a classroom and I see something that I wouldn't want for my own kids, I've got concerns, and those concerns have to be addressed.
Yeah, I so appreciate that, because I think sometimes we can get caught up in how some of the adults are talking, right? And it's I always try to assume positive intent. I really do, right? And even as a principal, in my time, sometimes when I feel like a conversation was getting lost from me, right? Like was going in a negative direction, I would actually say, like, to the parent, the caregiver, hey, we're here to do what's best for your child, correct? And I wouldn't just make it as a statement. I'd ask it as a question, because I wanted them to agree with that statement, to center them and myself, because I think sometimes it would be easy for my ego to get lost in that situation, where it's now like, okay, now I'm just gonna like argue with this parent because like I'm not liking the situation, and then you could easily lose yourself and not focus on the kid, right? And so I think that was for me. Like I always tell people, when you're having some of those tough decisions, you have to have that kind of centering moment where people are reminded why they are there. I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you each the same question. Somebody listening to, and I'm gonna start with Park. Someone says to you, what's one thing that we can start on our journey? What advice would you give them, Park? Go.
I think it would be to really step back and start with that question: what is it we do? Mm-hmm. And don't use jargon. I don't like jargon, because a lot of it, that's the flavor of the month type thing. Is that if somebody asked me, what is it you do, Park? And Jessica and Scott and the Alvarado community, as well as the Giano community in the Roland district, that is a world's greatest school, is we change lives and impact futures. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. And that's what today was about. And that was my goal. I don't know if I reached it, but that's what I was attempting to do. And that's what teachers do every day, mm-hmm. is attempt to change lives and impact futures, not prepare kids to be college and career ready.
Right.
And so start with that, I guess, that point of asking yourself, what is it we do? Is that it is a great place to start a conversation with staff and students, and ask and see what their responses are, because part of this process is not only the staff, but it's the kids, because the kids hold the teachers accountable for honor. Mm-hmm. And that's the beauty of watching it. When the teachers get out of line, or Scott gets out of line, mm-hmm. Jessica never gets out of line, is that they're going to hold them accountable with honor.
I love that. Jessica, what do you got? What's the one thing to start?
I think it would just be to simplify. I just feel like, I know, we talked earlier about the exhaustion of an educator. That exhaustion comes from all of the things that we have to focus on, all of the things that we have to juggle, right? Mm-hmm. So I think my focus would be through all of those things, through everything that through every decision I'm making, through all the strategies I'm trying, through all of the actions that I'm demonstrating, what is it that I want to communicate? And to really dig through all of those things and to ask myself, in doing this, what is it that I want to message to the kids in front of me? What is it that I want to message to our community? And so, yeah, it would be to dig and to simplify in that way.
I love it. Scott, you're up.
Let me start by saying this is a great question. Thank you so much for asking.
I was wondering, because like Jessica didn't say anything. So, oh my God.
I got to think of stuff for her all the time, man, all the time. So I'm going to give kind of a two-part. The first one would be that I use this thing all the time. The lens you choose to use will help you find what you're looking for. Like if it really, we have to be very intentional about which lens we choose to look through when doing this work. when looking at our students, at our staff, at our families, our communities, our colleagues and coworkers. It's our choice to decide on which lens we're going to look through when interacting with all those people and how we see them, right? And then the other part would be that we got to walk the talk. You know, when we're talking about the stuff like you're saying on the wall and all that other stuff, if our actions do not align with our beliefs, then it's going to be a big mess for everyone. We cannot say one thing and do another. We cannot communicate one thing and have contradicting actions to those words, right? Our kids and families will call us on it immediately. They will know it immediately, and they will respond immediately in the same way. And so it would be those two things, that there's a certain lens we need to look through when doing this work, and we got to really be about it.
Okay, so I got two things to kind of bring this all together. So there's this quote that I'm known for, this idea of make the positives so loud the negatives are almost impossible here. And I get crapped on for this quote all the time. They're like, oh, you don't think there's negatives in the world? It's like, I'm like, no, nobody's saying that. So like, if you look at the last little while, there's a lot of crap that's happening in our world, you know, all this other stuff. I do not have time for people that complain about everything all the time. It's not about not addressing negatives. It's about finding a way forward. That is what I've always advocated for. And so being very clear on this, I think part of it too is it is identifying, you know, things that are not working. It is identifying, you know, problems that we're having in our world, in our schools, and things like that. But we all know, let's not pretend we don't. We all know people that got a problem with every single solution. No matter what you're doing, it's wrong, right? We've all encountered that in our lives. And I just don't have time for that, because we need to move forward, right? Because like, as y'all said, this is about our kids, right? And the thing that I've always focused on, my job is to help kids find a path to success in a way that's meaningful to them, not to define what success is. They have to figure that stuff out themselves. We give them the tools to do that. But the thing that I want to give as my like one thing to do is based on this conversation. Surround yourself with awesome people. You know what's awesome? You're really actually helping me write my blog post right now, which is kind of cool because you're reminding me of something. And I'm going to tell this in the blog post now. So I actually, early on in my career, I was the first new hire at a school in, I think, 15 years. Okay. So it was a very veteran staff. It was a small town, small community. And there was a point where I did not feel comfortable going into the staff room. And I would eat lunch with the kids every day. And, you know, people would say like, what do you do? I just love eating lunch with the kids. But that was not totally true. I did enjoy that. And I would do it sometimes earlier. And there was a vice principal there. His name was Dale. I cannot remember his last name. And I feel bad because I want to give him credit. And he's like, hey, you okay? Like, I don't ever see you in the staff room, right? And I said, you know, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable because of A, B, and C. And he really kind of took me under his wing to a point where I did feel better in that space and doing that. And I remember that distinctly. And I think it's just kind of like, it could have been, but also on the other hand, some people might just say, no, there's nothing wrong. This is kind of how, like, you know, I know sometimes that when I'm speaking at a conference, I like, this is like confession time. I get talked to quite a bit, and sometimes I'm just overwhelmed. And I'll just go sit in the bathroom, and I'll close the door, and I'll just sit down like it's my office for 10 minutes just to not talk to anybody, right? Because I just need to I can't talk to anybody right now. And so I understand people doing that too. So I think part of it, when I was kind of listening to you thinking about that, is that I was really appreciative that somebody took notice. And I think it's just kind of just be aware of that community, because maybe I just wasn't a staff room guy, right? And maybe that's that, but just kind of check in with people, because, you know, sometimes they do that. So I just, that was one thing. The other two is that my grade 4 teacher, Miss Butler, I was like, is this the same Miss Butler? And I doubt it. But I was like, oh, like shout out to like Miss Butler, right? So Miss Butler, okay, Miss Butler, she wrote, this is one of my favorite things. And I did this every year when I was a teacher because of Miss Butler. She actually, at the end of the year, she wrote like a really long card to every single kid.
and this is a little embarrassing. I was like super into the Smurfs, right? Because Smurfs. Why are you laughing? This is why I didn't go in the staff room, because everyone's making fun of me about the Smurfs.
I just think it's funny. Well, I haven't thought about the Smurfs in a long time.
Well, come on, Papa Smurf, Grumpy Smurf, Brainy Smurf.
Which Smurf would you be if you could?
Oh, this is great. I love this. Okay, I don't know. I'd be, depending on the day, it could be Grumpy Smurf, right? So I hope sometimes I'm Brainy Smurf, right? So, anyways, she wrote on this card that she was shaped like a Smurf. Like just all the positive things about me. And my parents owned a restaurant. I used to bring pizza to the classroom. She talked about how much she loved when he did that and how much people appreciated that. And every year as a teacher, I took the time to write those long notes to kids. I didn't do it on Smurfs. I should have. That would have been awesome. But she did I don't think she didn't do Smurfs for everybody, right? Like it was very personalized to me and to like other kids in the classroom. And so I remember that. And that really made an impact on me. And I always think about that. And I think about that in the way we recognize kids, things like that too. And it's kind of like interesting how your, Francis Butler for you really, talked about how important it is to really recognize everyone. And I had a teacher who did that for me when I was a kid and then taught me to do that for kids too. So again, shout out to Miss Butlers.